I want to talk to you about church growth in general in America. Does anybody have an idea of how many people go to church on any given Sunday in America? What did your book say? Your book made this point. What percentage? Huh? I think your book says 41% go to church. However, on any given Sunday, not near that number are in church. Why? Well, look at your church. Does everybody show up every Sunday? No. And as you go out there into more non-conservative, non-whatever churches, you're going to find that people's names are on church rolls and they show up twice a year. Or they show up once a month. They come to any service but maybe one every 2 weeks. They still get counted as people who attend church. And so people, people who track these kind of statistics are saying that today, probably on any given Sunday, less than 18% of American population is in church. Some places way less than that. In Britain, for years they said less than 5%. Now they're saying less than 1 or 2% go to church at all. The Western church world is in decline. Do I need to make that point? Everything you read, you say, yeah, but we've got big mega churches today. Yes, we do. But at what cost do we have these big mega churches? Anybody know? Where does the growth come from in mega churches? I'm talking about churches like with 1,500 or more in them, up to 10,000. Where do they come from? Anybody know? The average mega church's growth, where does it come from? 80% of it is simply people leaving one church and going to where it's supposed to be happening. It's the mom and pop stores closing down for the big Walmarts. Pure and simple. Christianity Today says that. Church Growth Magazine say it. I've read the statistics for years. I've taught this class for years, so it's been and plus I've been a pastor for years. I've been very interested in what are the factors in American church scene here. 80%. Let me give you an example of what happened a number of years ago. A guy by the name of Charles Swindoll. Have you ever heard that man on the radio? Good Bible teacher. He used to be a pastor in Southern California. Very successful. That's where his radio ministry grew. Then he resigned that church and he came to, I think it was an evangelical free church he was pastoring. Then he came to Dallas, Texas to become the president of the Dallas Theological Seminary, a well-known evangelical seminary, one of the best in the country. He was the president and he missed preaching, which everybody does. When you preach for 20 years and all of a sudden you're doing something else, even if it's ministry, it drives you crazy when Sunday rolls around. That's what happened to him. So he started the church. In something like 6 weeks, he had 2,000 people. Do you think those were new converts in Dallas? I'll bet not 5 of them were. And so he went on the radio, or he said something publicly how God had blessed them and they had this big church and God was really blessed. And all the other area Dallas pastors were bemoaning the decline in their churches. Is this called kingdom growth? No. Does this make me look good if I'm Chuck Swindoll? Sure. But it does nothing for the overall kingdom of God as far as growth is concerned. Nothing's happening. Actually, we grew up through something like the 90s and we've then plateaued and we're declining now in actual church growth and membership. Now, are some churches growing? Yes. Are a few growing that is not just predominantly church swapping, or swapping churches or biological? The Amish are growing, by the way. But when you have 6 to 18 kids, you will grow. In a few generations, you're going to really grow. But they don't reach the outside world at all. It's called biological growth. So if you look at most of our holiness churches, and I know that not all of you come from one of these Westland or holiness churches, how many converts outside of families already connected to the church, biological growth or transfer growth, has happened in your church? I already know the answer to it. Almost none. Almost none. Surveys have been done. Dr. Avery did one a few years ago and sent out, and he's done some recent stuff here, just very recently. And he told me Saturday when we were at a coffee shop that he actually sent out a survey to the largest, like he contacted the holiness denominations and asked the moderators of those denominations for their 3 largest churches or so, and then he had somebody contact them to see what kind of growth had gone on and where that growth had come from. The largest churches were some of the worst at actually having growth from the community and non-church people. That is amazing. And wherever they had third-generation Christians, he just told me this Saturday, it was fascinating. Where they had third-generation Christians, they had no growth. Where they had first-generation Christians, those are the people that had the most bridges to the world and had reached the most non-church people. Wow. There's a lot in there, believe me. Somehow, by the 3rd generation, Christianity is hardly real. It's just a form, it's a culture. There's no power, there's no dynamism. There's no even concern for the world anymore. And you just have this kind of thing. So, if mega churches are growing with church transfer, and by the way, I took a class a few years ago with a mega church pastor. His name was Newt Larson. And Newt Larson pastors what's called the Chapel in Akron. He did for years. You live up there, you've heard that name. He's on the radio. He gives these little 30-minute, walks into the camera saying, he talks great. I played basketball with him. He was also a good shot. Newt Larson had 5,700 people in his church. But over and over and over and over in that week, he had just graduated from the program that I had enrolled in. So he was an instructor now for this doctoral program that both Dr. Bird and I have graduated from since. And I remember Newt saying to us, most of us pastors in that class, he said, you know what, guys, you will never pastor more than 90 people. And we're like, what? You have 5,700. I don't pastor those people. I preach to them, but I don't pastor them. So what he did is he broke down his mega church into what he called congregations of 45 to 90 people. And then he put 3 people over them, kind of a teaching pastor, a counselor, or a kind of a care pastor, and then somebody who was like a deacon who took care of the financial stuff and the business stuff. They were called adult Bible fellowships. And he said, this is how you have congregational life in 45 to 90 people. Anything above that, a pastor can preach to, but he doesn't pastor. He doesn't give care to. He's got to have people that work with him to give that care. So he would call, like in their assembly, they could have 1,200 people. They had 3 or 4 services a day. He preached the same sermon. Start at 9, 10:30, 12, 5. And 4 people, 4 times 48, 1,200 is, nobody could come back to a service. You've got 4,800 people, and 1,000 people didn't go to church on Sunday. I mean, out of 5,700 members, of course, you're not going to get maybe 80%, maybe. So he called that celebration when you came together in a big group. He called it congregation when you met outside of that group, which they did in an adult Bible fellowship. And then during the week, they met in groups of 8 to 12 people. The congregation was broken down into small, what he called cell groups. So what is life? A cell grows and divides, and that's what they did. They kept dividing like that into small groups during the week, and then 45 to 90 people, adult Bible, where congregational life goes on. And then you could come to the big celebration of 1,200 people. So most of us attend a congregation. We don't go to a celebration, but we get the heart and soul of church life, where we have 50 to 150 people. And most of you attend a church like that. You do. A few people over 150, but not many. The majority of churches in America are under 90 people. The majority are. But that doesn't mean the majority of Christians attend a church under 90 people. Because if you have one that has 10,000 in it, That wipes out a lot of congregations of 90 people, or that offsets it. So it isn't like a majority of Christians go to a church under 90 people, but the majority of churches, if you just count churches, are under 90 people out there in the heartland of America, rural America, and even in the cities of America. Most are under 90 people. Now, overall church attendance is coming down. Overall identification with Christianity is coming down. It's our hour to rise up and be a witness. The darker the night, the brighter the light shines. The more the opportunity to spread the gospel. So it isn't a discouraging thing. But don't count church growth when you simply have a bunch of people who leave one church and come to yours. That might be local church growth, but it's not kingdom growth. It has nothing to do with kingdom growth.